Hello and welcome to our second Bruin Career Insights event on YouTube Live. My name is Angela Scales and I'm a fellow Bruin. I serve as the Senior Director of Bruin Connections here at the UCLA Alumni Association. Thank you all for joining us tonight as we explore the nonprofit world. To set the stage for tonight's discussion, this is our second event in the Bruin Career Insights series. This monthly YouTube Live series will focus on career development resources for every stage of the career life cycle. Some, like tonight's, will focus on a particular industry, allowing Bruins to gain insight from an industry expert. Others will focus on a specific skill set or a trend in the career space. In addition to this series, a wonderful career resource is UCLA One. For those of you who aren't familiar with the site, UCLA One is the online career community exclusively for Bruins. So if you haven't already set up your profile, it's very simple. Just go to uclaone.com and connect via your Facebook or LinkedIn profile. After tonight's event, we would love to hear your feedback and suggestions for upcoming topics. You can email us at careerprograms@alumni.ucla.edu with any thoughts. Also, a quick thank you to our Blue, Gold, and Life members for making events like this possible. It's through your continued support that we're able to provide career programming for all Bruins. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, just one quick housekeeping measure. In the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you should see the live chat function. Using the live chat, you can send questions to our speaker, Mai, throughout the event, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible. And now, on to the main event. Our speaker tonight is Mai Nguyen, a sociology graduate of UCLA from 2000. Mai serves as the Director of Development and Special Events at Planned Parenthood Los Angeles. So Mai, why don't you get us started by telling us a little bit about your background and how you got started in the nonprofit world?
Thanks, Angela. Hi, everybody. I'm Mai. I started out actually got my job at the Alumni Association from an alumnus. She was starting a nonprofit event production firm, which was amazing. It was a great way for me to learn about business as well as nonprofits. I started there, worked there for about 2 or 3 years, really learning how to really focusing on events, not necessarily just nonprofits, but events in that world. But I felt that we were working at we worked, with multiple nonprofits, and I really felt like I wanted to concentrate my energy on one nonprofit or an industry in which, or a nonprofit in which I cared about. So I stepped away from that wonderful opportunity, great learning opportunity, and kind of found Planned Parenthood. So I started off as an assistant and have worked my way up. I've been here now for 13 years, and it's been a wonderful opportunity for me.
What would you say that you learned from those first few years and just kind of getting into the industry, into the space?
I think one of my biggest lessons is really to take on new projects when they come to you, take opportunities as they come to you. One thing that Judy, my first boss, I had to gain her trust. I was this brand new person out of school, and I needed to prove to her that I could do these projects, do them well to the best of my ability, and then she would give me more and I would ask for more. One thing that I've learned here also at Planned Parenthood is I've reached out to my bosses and been really clear with them that I want them to be a mentor to me, and that I'm here to, learn everything I can from them and take those opportunities as they come. I've really gotten a lot of amazing opportunities here at Planned Parenthood.
And kind of led into my next question. Given your longevity at the organization, what are some of the factors that led you to stay and maybe pursue promotional opportunities versus maybe jumping into another organization or opportunity?
Right. I started out as an assistant and kind of took, and I was in Orange County in the Planned Parenthood there, and I there was a great opportunity here to work in with individual donors, which I had never done before. So I took on that opportunity with an events background, but not kind of working in that. And as our department here grew, they figured out I had an events background. And so each new position from there was created for me. You know, I think working with, because I had such a close relationship with my superiors and my supervisors, I was just continuing to prove myself and continuing to take on new projects. And we would talk it through, like what I would talk through with them, what my plan was with my career would be, and what I wanted. And, you know, we worked together to create new positions for me. And every position I've had since my first assistant position was created for me. So I've been really lucky, really, really lucky to have people kind of be my mentors along the way.
And with that, do you feel like you've seen certain benefits to having stayed at one organization versus maybe moving around, and just kind of what the pros and cons have been for your own career?
I think for me, I've become a better manager because I've stayed at this organization. The positions that are underneath me are ones that I've held. So I kind of understand what the pitfalls and where growth opportunities are, and what, and so that has made me a much better manager, because I know I'm one of the, I feel for myself as a manager, I like to manage things that I know how to do. And and if I don't know how to do them, I want to learn how to do them, because I don't want to manage someone or manage projects that I don't necessarily have expertise in. So that's one amazing thing about being here as long as I have, is like, I've kind of been through the ringer. I've been through a lot of stuff here, and that's great, because I think that learning opportunity has already given me other opportunities. You know, I've had so many great opportunities here. If I hadn't been here as long, I wouldn't have been able to work on the Hillary campaign, and I would have never gotten as close to Hillary as I have. And I would have never been able to, you know, grow. The one thing about being here a long time is the change takes time, and growth and improvement takes time, especially in an organization. Planned Parenthood is a very large organization, and that takes a lot of push and time, especially with donors that have been with the organization for 40 years. You know, change is hard, but for someone who has been here as long as I have, that trust with not only my donors, but with my staff and with the senior staff here is there, because I've been here and I've proven myself, and that's the positive there. I think one thing about being here as long as I have, that is a little bit of a negative, is when you jump jobs, you have the opportunity to get a larger salary. You know, like, I've had to really push hard to be paid what others that come in at my level are paid. So that's something to be said. You know, that is the biggest opportunity of jumping jobs. And sometimes, you know, one thing, you have to be sure that there's continued growth opportunities where you are. If you're in the same position for 2 or 3 years and there's no opportunities, you know, that's a sign to move on. You know, I think that you know, 2, 3, 4 years for the most part is time to really kind of look for what's next.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So in thinking about that, when you're hiring new staff, does this kind of come into play? Are you cautious in terms of seeing someone's resume where maybe they've jumped around a lot, or that, like, seeing whether that they have invested in an organization?
Definitely. I think I'm hiring right now, so it's something I've been noticing in resumes. You know, I think for me, as a manager, and as someone who's looking for someone to train and someone to take on new projects, why would I invest in someone that is going to leave me in 6 months? Because, you know, they're not, you know. So I think it's, during your interview, it's also, I'm interviewing you, but you're interviewing me. Am I someone that you want to work with? Is this organization somewhere you want to work? I think, working if you're jumping within the same industry, that's one thing, if it's jumping from industry to industry, like you're all over the place, that's a whole nother thing. So I think those are, I think that I always look for someone who is willing to put in the effort and to buy in for lack of a better word. And so, working at anywhere is hard, but working at a nonprofit where the resources are not as plenty is just as hard. And I think, you have to kind of realize that when someone's applying for a job.
Right, right. So given those pieces, are there any other specific personality types or just certain traits that you look for in the hiring process?
I do look for someone who is a go-getter, someone who initiates projects, someone who wants to own projects, someone who's organized, especially when you're an event planner or in development in general. Organization is key. Attention to detail is key. You'd be amazed how many typos are in resumes and cover letters, or the cover letter is to the wrong place. That happens a lot. I know that when people are applying, you're applying for a lot of things, but be careful, because that's, if I'm looking for someone who's detail oriented, that's the last thing I want to see is a typo in a cover letter.
So in today's career space, we often hear about people who are trying to find a career that really aligns with their passions. So one question we've heard is, if you don't have work experience that maybe speaks to that passion, but you want to get into that area, are there maybe other ways in which you could demonstrate the passion if you don't have it in work experience?
I say volunteer. Nonprofits are always looking for volunteers, and it's a great way for you to learn about the culture of the nonprofit, get introduced to staff at the nonprofit, because the job that I just had hundreds of resumes, and you'd be amazed at how many people kind of took the extra effort and was like, hey, my friend applied. Will you look at the resume? I would probably have never seen some of my the resumes of my top candidates if someone didn't kind of shepherd it through. And if you're making relationships with a staff member here and they say, hey, I love this person, she's a great volunteer, she has a real passion for her work, I know that her resume might not align perfectly, but I know she can do your job. I'm going to take a second look at that resume and maybe bring that person in.
And what would you say, having been there for a while, what do you think are some of the misconceptions that people have about working in the nonprofit world?
I think the first thing I always hear is we're, at least at Planned Parenthood, and I know at a number of we're a very large nonprofit, and that we are more corporate than most corporate places sometimes. I mean, I think the number of, because we have to protect ourselves, the legalities and the contracts and all that stuff is huge. We're not able to, the level of bureaucracy is probably pretty, it's a lot. I have to get things approved in language, and you don't really necessarily expect that at a nonprofit, but one of our size, our healthcare organization, there's a lot of things that we have to deal with. So that, I think, is the biggest one. I think, a lack of resources. That's not yes, there is a lack of resources, but we also are, I think that, we're not worried. I hate to say this, and but I think sometimes when people in development, when people are raising money, well, we need to keep the lights on. That's not necessarily who we are as Planned Parenthood or other large nonprofits. I mean, I think that's something to be said. And I think there are really competitive pay. Pay is pretty competitive. I think here, at least here, I know not at all places that's true. I think that's something that is hard is to balance the pay with the passion.
Definitely. So you mentioned sometimes the typos, things like that with resumes. Are there any other common mistakes you see either in resumes or in your in-person interviews when you're hiring?
I think the first thing is, in any interview, know where you're interviewing with. You'd be surprised that, oh, I know Planned Parenthood. Yeah, you do, but there's a lot you might not know. And I think that's doing some great research, coming prepared with questions. That shows interest. That shows that you've really thought about it. You've really thought about what your career here might be. I think that's huge. And one thing that I just learned, actually, a couple of things this week, I had some interviews this week. Come with a couple of examples of how you work or projects you've worked on. I've had a number of people use the same example 4 or 5 times in an interview. I already heard about that. Like, let me, be creative a little bit.
So in thinking about the networking space, especially at a nonprofit, would you say that there's any unique elements to how you might network or how you would identify a mentor in the nonprofit world?
There are professional networking organizations within the nonprofit industry. There's the Young Nonprofit Network, which is a group of just young people that work in the nonprofit world. They go and they network and do social activities. So that's a good place. I think there is one on the west side and one downtown. I'm not sure if there's the same one, but I know they do events throughout the city. In fundraising specifically, there is the Association of Fundraising Professionals, AFP, and that's a great organization. There is always, there was just a lunch yesterday, and there's always kind of job opportunities talked about there, and there's a lot of professional development opportunities through AFP. But I think if you are going to, volunteer at an organization and create relationships with the staff there, I think that's huge. I think being genuine and creating actual relationships. Don't just trade cards. Like, yeah, follow up with people, talk to them, ask questions. I think I get cards all the time, but I'm not necessarily going to stick my neck out for someone who gave me a card. I'm going to stick my neck out for someone who took the time and wanted to, to ask about things, or kind of use me as counsel, or, I also don't want, I only really stick my neck out for people I know, people I genuinely know. So I think one thing I've learned from my boss here, and it's something that I've been advantageous to me, is network with people, not only those that are the positions you want to be in, but also along the way, the people that are next to you, because they're just as much a resource as anybody. And I think one thing I've learned is to talk about what you want to do, because you never know what those connections are going to be.
Right. That's so true. The point about peer networking is so important. So I'm going to transition us to a few questions that we got in our online RSVP form. So the first question is from Danielle, and she asked, how do you balance your passion with your desire to make a good salary?
That's hard, especially if you're starting out in the nonprofit industry, because there is quite a bit of demand for nonprofit jobs. For the associate position, which is for me what I'm hiring for right now, is right above an assistant position, 2 to 3 years out of school. I'm getting people with masters. I'm getting people with PhDs. I'm getting, I think that people really want to work here, which is great. But I think, you do have to, if you are coming from an industry where you're making 6 figures and you want to all of a sudden work at Planned Parenthood, directors make 6 figures. It's not necessarily something that comes at every position. But, I think there are certain parts of nonprofits that will pay more. Development is always a part of a nonprofit that pays more, because you are revenue generating. That's something to think about. We also, more than 2/3, 3/4 of our employees are clinical employees for us. So, we are very competitive when it comes to our physician assistants, nurse practitioners, clinicians in general. So we pay very competitively to any other healthcare organization. So something to think about. Grant-funded positions, education, those kinds of positions are very likely not going to make as much money as, say, a development or a healthcare position. So just something to think about.
Yeah, that's great advice. Our next question comes from Elise, and she said, what are the best ways of making the transition from the for-profit to the nonprofit world, and were there changes that she should be mentally prepared for?
I think the first thing is, because it is a passion and something that my colleagues as well, the work-life balance does change a little bit. You know, you work a little more, and because, you know, there's always more to do at a nonprofit. There's always more, and not enough staff resources. Even here, even at this really large one we have a big building and lots of people, but there's always, you know, there's always a lack of resources when it comes to staff. So some positions might be doing more. And so that's something to think about. Like, there are a lot of jobs that you work 9 to 5, you go home and it's 9 to 5, you know. Here, there's an event at night, or there's a donor brunch on a Sunday, or things like that. I mean, I think that does happen, especially in fundraising, very, very often. For me, I'm someone who flexes time for my staff. When, you know, if they're working on a Sunday, they can come in late on a Monday. That's, you know, that flexibility is there a little bit more for us at a nonprofit. I think transitioning, I think but I think even from nonprofit to for-profit, I think there's industries that are very casual too. Like, I mean, when you look at the tech industry, I mean, that's a whole new world. I think it all depends on the personality of that nonprofit itself.
Right, right.
Sorry,
so
as not to answer your question, you wanted probably.
That was great. So as we move into some of our audience questions, I want to remind the audience that you can use the live chat function in the upper right-hand corner on YouTube to submit questions for Mai. We've got some great questions here. One of them is, how were you able to convince your supervisors to always provide growth opportunities for you?
You have to prove yourself. You have to do your job to the best of your ability and then some. I think that's, you know, if I'm not going to trust you with more if you can't do what you currently do. Be the best at your current job, master it, and then come to me and ask for more.
I was actually, that leads into a secondary question. Is that something where you have any advice about how you approach that conversation? Is there a way you approach that conversation with your supervisor that would best start the conversation about an opportunity for growth?
I think, you know, I think it's, I hate to say this, but it's making your supervisor feel good. Like, you're so good at your job. Like, is it something, you know, I'd love for you to be a mentor for me. I think that your position is somewhere I want to be in 5 years. You know, I'd love to talk to you about how you got to your job and what you're doing. And I think asking for regular meetings with your supervisor, and I think it's also, you know, talking to your supervisor, like, hey, can I talk to you about how I'm doing? Can we have a status report once a month, once every couple of weeks, so they know that you're serious about doing the best job that you can?
Well, you just led right into the next audience question. So they asked, what are some good ways to initiate new opportunities in a job that you've been in for a while? So maybe you're feeling stuck. Is there a way to communicate that you want to take on more, or you'd like new opportunities?
I mean, I think it's very similar. I mean, I think it's, you know, meeting with your boss, asking for that meeting, not just around the time when you're getting a review. I think that I think you have to manage up. I think that's a lot of times, especially here at nonprofits, my VP is in meetings all day long, every single day. And, you know, carving out time to talk to her is really hard, but it's, you know, scheduling something a month in advance on her calendar so she holds it. Or, you know, sometimes if I see, or sometimes this happens often when she has a canceled meeting, I see her door open, I'm there. You know, I'm like, hey, how's it going? I just wanted to update you on what's going on, and then kind of transition it into another conversation.
Yeah.
I think you have to be a little advantageous about it. I mean, don't be stalkerish about it. I mean, don't be stalkerish, because I could totally see that happening too. But I mean, I think being an asset to your boss. I mean, for me, I really love when my staff takes as much passion and ownership of their own work, because that is huge for me. I love that when someone is like, this is mine, I want to do it, I want to do it well, and communicating with me constantly on how it's going. And if you're over communicating, ask, am I telling you too much? Is this too much information? Like, I'm pretty open. That's something that I like to do. But I mean, I think taking cues from your boss is huge too. Maybe your boss doesn't like that. You know, I don't know. I mean, I think the first thing that I did with my first boss is I took cues from her. I mirrored her work. Like if she was there a little bit longer, I was there a little bit longer. If she, you know, if she wanted to talk about it, we wanted to talk about it. Like, I think it's mirroring her a little bit and kind of learning her temperaments and what she likes and what she doesn't like and what I can do to make her job easier. Yes, what you can do to make your boss's job easier. Huge.
Great little definition of managing up. So
Yes.
another question from the audience comes from Mason, and he said, what are some good ways to get a feel for what working at a nonprofit is like if you're thinking of moving into that sector?
We here at Planned Parenthood have internships, and that's something that we do not only in development but in other parts of our work. We've had some people take sabbaticals from other organizations to come here and do a 2-month, 3-month internship. That could be hard if you're not able to afford that, but we also, for us, we have volunteer groups that do plan events. And that's something that's extracurricular for those that are working during the day, but they can still come in and help plan our food event. And they get a good feel of the organization, a good feel because they're coming to meetings, learning about the organization, learning about how Planned Parenthood works. That's something that we do here. I think a lot of kind of other organizations have guilds and things like that too. I think, you know, this is UCLA one is a great opportunity. I know that the Alumni Association also has a career database, which you can, you know, search for different industries and different careers. And those people put themselves in the database. They want to be called. Call them, ask, because they want to be helpful.
That's a great point, and it kind of leads into a question we have here from an audience member about informational interviews. I guess one part would be, you know, do people often reach out to you to do one? And if they do, what's the best way for them to reach out to you, knowing, you know, you have a busy schedule, you have a lot going on? What's the best approach if someone wants to do an informational interview?
I'm always open to them. People email me all the time, and I'm happy to schedule. I think the best is to schedule a time that is convenient for that person, whether it's after work or on a weekend or whatever. That's something that I do, and I'm happy to do that all the time. I mean, I'm one of those people where I've been helped along the way, very much so with other Bruins and other staff. So that's something that I look to do as well. So I think reaching out, following up. When you meet me at an event at UCLA, I've given out hundreds of cards and probably only been reached out to a dozen or maybe 20 times. So I think that's, you know, follow up, tell me where you met me, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you're interested in, and I'm happy to help, or find someone who will be willing to help you too.
Absolutely. So another question here from the audience says, what are the greatest challenges you've experienced working in the development space at a nonprofit, and what's been the most fulfilling?
Development. I really enjoy development a lot. I really do. I do a lot of events, and I also do our political fundraising. So I'm a Politico, as you can see. I mean, I've talked about Hillary like 12 times. So that's something that I really enjoy. I think for me, one thing about development why I think it's something that's I'm good at is because I have a huge passion for our work. I really do care about Planned Parenthood as an organization. And I think the donors and the volunteers that I work with see that and feel that. And I think that that's something that's hugely important to development work. You know, I think there are really two kinds of development people that are fundraisers that jump from organization to organization, or consultants that do fundraising for multiple organizations, or someone who's been like me, who's very mission driven. There's probably only 4 or 5 organizations that I'm willing to kind of fundraise for because those are my passions. And that's something different. I think for me as a fundraiser, and I think that's why I've been as successful as I have, because it's something that is truly passionate for me. I think that's when the most fulfilling thing is really seeing the growth. You know, when I started taking over events, we were raising about $1 million That was about 6 years ago, and we're now raising almost 4. So that's kind of, and that's through volunteers. I manage 400 volunteers, and they've really become as passionate, if not more passionate than I am. And I think that's been the most fulfilling part, is really sharing those passions and igniting that fire. Because Planned Parenthood has been a little controversial, just a little.
Well, that's incredible. Those numbers are incredible. How would you say, you mentioned managing up? How, if someone, especially if they may have graduated recently, how do they manage up? What would be your tips on how to do that?
Oh, that's hard. That's really, really hard, because I think you do have to kind of learn, really get to know your boss, get to know who they are and what they like and how they communicate. I've been through 3 vice presidents since I've been here, and they've all been really, really different. I think one has been really casual. I could walk into, you walked into her office at any time, and she would sit down and talk to you, and it didn't really matter. While others, like the one I have now, is so busy, and so that I have to kind of schedule time with her and figure out when I can get in. So I think it's figuring out how your boss is, how they like to communicate. Right now, my boss loves to communicate via email and text. My 2 previous bosses, that would not work at all. So figuring out who they are, how they like to communicate, when is a good time to communicate with them. Our CEO has been in a really good mood these last couple of days, so I've slipped in a couple questions that I've needed to answer. So those are, you have to pick your moments, I think. I think that's the best. And I know that's not the best answer, but it's something that I think you need to learn to read. Learning to read people is hugely important.
Yeah. And like you said, to adapt to the different styles of different leaders.
Yeah.
So another question here from the audience says, going with the doing more with less concept, how do you effectively produce more work with less staff while keeping the kind of staff and volunteer morale high?
Creating systems is something that's been big for us here. We've invested in kind of teaching some of our older donors and older volunteers how to use Google Docs. It's been interesting, but so we've been pushing a lot back onto our volunteers and having them be helpful to us. They're filling out spreadsheets and doing that, and we're really focusing on higher level things, and it does take time to invest in staff and volunteers and interns in doing that, but training them well, checking in, making sure they're doing that. And I think it's also really looking at what's important. Is for me, I don't necessarily want to be in discussions about what the tablecloth color is. At the end of the day, I'm paying for the tablecloth color, but the 3-hour discussion that took to get there, you decide. I'll go with whatever. So you think it's, as a staff person, you have to feel like what things you want to be involved in.
Yeah, that's great advice. It looks like we have one last question from the audience. They asked, what are some qualities you look for in a volunteer?
Someone who's going to be there when they say they're going to be there. I think when volunteers, I volunteer at different organizations like this one, like UCLA. So, but I think, sometimes volunteers don't necessarily take the time to let us know when they're not going to be here, or, as staff, we have to prepare projects for you, or we have to take time and prep things for you. So if you're not going to be here, if you're running late, or that is something hugely important. Tell us when you're going to be here when you're going to be here. And I think using our time wisely, I think that's huge in in a volunteer. And I really want to work with volunteers that are nice and want to be here and care about our work and aren't doing it just to get hours for whatever school they need to get hours for. I mean, I'll take those too. I mean, here, I need 1,000 envelopes of stuff, but I think, I'm someone who likes to interact with my volunteers very much so. I want to make sure that I'm there and answering questions that they have, and so that person, you know, I being honest with your skill set is also really important. I don't want to kind of set a volunteer up for failure. If someone doesn't know how to do something, be honest with me about it. I'm happy to show you how, but I would rather that than once you're done with the project 3 hours later and it's not what I need. So I think that's huge.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much, Mai. Your advice and your experience have shed such great light on some of the opportunities and also the challenges of working in the nonprofit space. To those of you who are watching, thank you so much for joining us and participating in the discussion. If you missed a portion of tonight's event and you want to share it, or you want to share it with others, you can find the recording right on our UCLA YouTube channel. Also, as mentioned in our intro, this is the second event in our Bruin Career Insights series. So please share with us your questions or your ideas for other industries or other career development topics that you'd like to see us cover. We want to bring you tailored programming, but we can't do that without your input. So send us your feedback at careerprograms@alumni.ucla.edu. Thank you to Mai and for everyone for being a part of tonight's discussion. And once again, a special thank you to our Blue, Gold, and Life members for making events like this possible. We will see you all again on March 29th for our next Bruin Career Insights event, which will be focused on the top 10 tips for job seekers, featuring Kate Fletcher, who is the CEO and founder of Treehouse Partners. Have a great evening and go Bruins!